Hey friend, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to mix bass DI and amp tracks to work together in a mix. We're going to be looking at mixing bass DI and amp tracks to work together in a mix today using just EQ and a little bit of compression along the way as well. This is going to help you make sure you have a good, solid bottom end on your bass guitar and you have no phase issues as you're bringing your bass up in the mix. Before we dive in here though, if you're ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the guesswork. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and take a look at this bass guitar. I'm going to start, of course, by playing you the bass in the mix, and then I'll solo it up as well so you can hear what our finished bass mix sounds like. And then we'll dive into the processing on both the DI, the amp, and the group channel here. So here's our finished mix for this song.
I'll send my love on a shooting star. I'll send it fast and I'll send it far. Hear your voice in my sleep at night, but only in my dreams could it be this right. To me it won't ever be the same, so please come back. I miss you, Jay.
So you can hear we've got all the nice qualities of having a DI and an amp together here. We've got the nice bottom end, but we've also got some distortion, some breakup going on there, some fuzz coming from the mic on the amp here. What we're doing to get these two to work together, so let me take off the processing on the group here. So both of these tracks here, the DI and the amp, are sending into the bass bus here, which is then sending out to the mix bus. The only thing running on the individual channels is the frequency split trick here. So all we're doing is making our DI our bottom end and our amp track our top end. This makes sure we don't have two signals printing the same low end, the same notes in the bottom end, because then they're going to be slightly off time because, of course, the sound's not going to come out of the amp and hit the microphone at the same time that the DI signal makes it into our board, right? There's going to be a little bit of a difference there. Our amp track's going to be slightly behind from our DI because that's a more instantaneous signal coming out of the DI box there. So we're going to have the same low end printing at two different times. So if we just run both of these tracks flat, we're going to have some phase issues in our bottom end. I don't like to go about doing the whole time aligning thing. You can do that if you want to get really, really precise with it. All I do here is I make the DI our bottom end and the amp track our top end. That way we just have one track printing the bottom end and there's no phase issues going on there. And there's no kind of, you can get that weird chorusy effect if you have two signals printing the same top end as well here. So let me solo up. Here's our DI, and you can see all I'm doing is I'm rolling in a low pass filter. So our DI track is only 180 hertz and below, and that's a 24 dB per octave slope, excuse me, so we don't have too much of a crossover going on. I'll hit play here and I'll A-B this so you can hear the difference. So from our DI, our raw DI, and then I'll kick it in, you can hear just the bottom end. So that's our DI, just our bottom end, everything 180 hertz and below. Now I usually pick the DI for the bottom end because it tends to be cleaner and have, less saturation and distortion from whatever amp you're using. But sometimes you can get a good low end sound coming out of your amp and choose your amp track to be your bottom end. But anywho, we're making our amp track just our top end. So we're doing the opposite effect, the opposite EQ filter here on our bass amp track. So we're only using 180 hertz and above here, same 24 dB per octave slope. So we have not much going on in the crossover, giving us phase issues, just our top end here. So we'll do the same thing. Here's our raw amp track, and then I'll kick in the filter. You can hear just the top end. So you can hear there is good bottom end coming from our amp track, but it has a little bit more breakup to it, a little bit more push, and I don't want that coming through on our bottom end. I like the clean low end coming from our DI. That's our first move here to get our bass DI and our bass amp working together, is implementing the frequency split trick. Then what we're going to do is we're going to mix them as one bass sound. So once we get them working together with our frequency split trick, we're going to mix them like they're one bass sound. So now when we put them together, we have this really solid bass sound. And I'll actually A/B these two plugins. You can hear the difference without the frequency split trick. So we'll start without it, and then I'll kick it in. You can hear how much more solid our bass sound becomes. You can hear without those two EQs in, doing our frequency split, we have a lot more of that nosy frequency around like 200. That's kind of the headache frequency that builds up on bass guitar, especially if we have two of them printing the same bottom end. We're going to get those phase issues. You can hear it cancels out a lot of the nice sub area and the warmth, and we just kind of get this boxiness, this nosiness around 200 hertz. That's where we get build up, and that's where we get that headache frequency. So getting rid of all that with our frequency split trick, getting a nice solid bottom end. Now we're going to treat this like one bass guitar, one good bass sound. First things we're going to do first is our EQ. So I'm rolling in a high pass filter. We're up at 69 hertz here, just rolling up to under the fundamental. The fundamental for me is usually around 80 on bass. So we're rolling up just below that to about 70 hertz here. Take a listen with and without the high pass filter. So I'll start without it here, and then we will kick it in. You can hear the difference it makes on our bass. We lose a little bit of the sub area off the bat here, but don't worry, we're going to get some of that back. I want to control the bottom end going into the compressor. I want to sculpt what the compressor is going to hear so I get the reduction I want and I get the sound I want out of the compressor. Compressors don't usually react too well to hearing a bunch of bottom end here. So just controlling our bottom end, getting it even and focused on the fundamental before we push into our compressor here. We'll get that low end back later. The next move I'm going to make before we do jump into our compressor is I'm going to pull out some of this 200 hertz area. That's that kind of headache frequency that we were just talking about where there's some buildup. We're at 198 hertz here, so about 200 hertz, pulling out about 5 dB. You can hear we're taking out a part of the frequency range that's not contributing good energy to this track. We don't need that boominess there around 200. We want to focus on the warmth down 80 and 100 hertz here. Before we get to our high boosts, I'm going to throw our compressor in here. I'd rather boost into our compressor. This is the 1176 emulation from Studio One, their FET comp. Really, really awesome plugin here. Running it pretty much my usual settings here. So 0.55 milliseconds on the attack, and then 50 milliseconds on the release. There's just something magic about these settings on an 1176. It always comes out exactly the way you want it. 4:1 ratio here, so the gentlest ratio. We're going to be doing about 3 to 5 dB reduction here on the bass guitar. You can push harder on bass guitar, especially once we get them working together. We can push these two into the compressor pretty hard, and it'll kind of give us some breakup on the top end. It'll emphasize that nice breakup we have from our amp, and it allows the bass to cut through the track a little bit better. So here's without our compressor, and then with it. You can hear it gives a lot of warmth to the bottom end, and that 100 hertz, that 80 hertz area on our bass guitar really comes through nicely now that we've focused the low end and kind of rolled off that excessive sub area. We don't want the compressor to hear that. We just want it to hear that fundamental. So it gives us that warmth and that bloom, as well as controlling the volume on our bass guitar. Now we're going to go back here. Now we're going to boost our top end into our compressor here. So our compressor will hold these top end boosts in place on our bass guitar. The first area I like to boost is around 700 or 800 hertz, and this kind of gives you that bitey frequency range on bass guitar, which can make it sound mean the more you boost this frequency, but it also just helps bass sit really nicely with a pair of electric guitars. So here's without this boost, and then I'll kick it in. We're doing about a 5 dB boost at 700 hertz. Just adding some nice mid-range bite there. It helps a bass guitar sit really nicely with a pair of electric guitars, which is mainly what we have going here in this track, is a pair of electric rhythm guitars as well as a piano. So that bit of mid-range helps our bass sit nicely between those guitars. Last boost we're doing here on our first EQ is a pretty excessive boost here. We're up at 4K. We're doing a 15 dB boost at 4K, and this is going to bring up all the fret noise and the finger noise on our bass. You can hear, the pick making contact with the strings. It gives us that string noise, that fret noise that helps our bass really cut through in the top end. So if you're listening on smaller speakers, your bass doesn't disappear and it's not non-existent. You can actually hear it. It helps you discern the notes the bass player is playing. So here's without this 4K boost, and then I'll kick this pretty big boost in. You can hear all of that top end it's bringing up. So we get that nice grit from the amp, from the mic on the amp up in the top end. We get a little bit of room noise as well, but that's okay. We're not going to hear that inside the track. It helps to bring up that top end grit, that fret noise, that finger noise that we hear on our bass guitar. That helps us discern the notes the bass player is playing and make sure we can hear it on smaller speakers. Last thing we're doing here now is we're bringing up our bottom end. I like to do this post compression here, and once we get our frequency split trick in, we can boost our bottom end without worry of phase issues here on our bass guitar. So mixing it like one bass channel, one bass track, boosting our bottom end at the end of the chain to bring up this balanced and controlled bottom end. Only about 4.5 dB, 5 dB boost at 80 hertz here. You can hear all the warmth and bloom it brings up on our bass guitar. It's one of the most crucial parts of the bass sound is the bottom end and that fundamental frequency. That's why we leave it to the end here. We want to get it even, we want to get controlled before we try and bring up that bottom end. So it's not all out of whack, excuse me, and it's not jumping all over the place. We do it last here, and we get that beautiful controlled bloom in the bottom end of that beautiful low frequency that we want to hear. So it's not bouncing around, it's right where we want it inside the track. So let me A-B here, we'll throw it back inside the mix as well, and you can hear our before and after of everything. And we'll A-B our frequency split trick as well here.
In my sleep at night, but only in my dreams could it be this right. To me it won't ever be the same, so please come back, I miss you, Jay. I'll send my love on a shooting star, I'll send it fast and I'll send it far. Hear your voice in my sleep at night, but only in my dreams could it be this right. To me it won't ever be the same, so please come back, I miss you, Jay.
So if you're trying to mix your bass DI and your amp track to work together, remember, get them controlled first. And for me, that means doing the frequency split trick, making our DI our bottom end, making our amp our top end, then sending them to a bus and mixing them as one bass guitar. So getting rid of that low mid mud, bringing up our top end for finger noise, compressing it, and then bringing up our bottom end so it's controlled and even in our mix. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.